but the Minister of National Security more or less categorically said, no, there is no cover-up. The problem is, I think it's plausible, this denial, because, and I tried to explain this yesterday, I don't think we have the ability to really know more. We already have a hard time investigating crimes that happens in country. We're going to investigate the background to a vessel that's registered in Tanzania, who we have intermittent contacts with, whether it is a photo from Aruba, radar contact from our local radar surveillance system. But it's not as though we have a paper trail, we have, radio logs. I mean, maybe they have it, and they're just not telling us, in which case, all right, fine, right? But to some extent, I do believe that this incident happened. Now, a question was asked, why is someone transporting? And one report said potentially the cargo was something like 350,000 barrels of oil or 350 barrels of oil or whatever. It was a potentially a large amount of oil in its cargo. Why is it going to Guyana? Guyana is in the business of extracting oil and gas, refining it, and exporting it. So why is a barge carrying oil coming from Panama to Guyana? Who knows? And who knows why we do not have more information for a vessel that was traveling through our waters, that traveled through many nations' waters. So one could imagine that, hey, we just ask all of the countries up the line, Venezuela, Aruba, Colombia, what did they tell you? What records was left with you? Granted, maritime shipping is not so simple, right? It's not as though just to travel through waters, you have to go in to a port and go into customs and declare a whole set of things. It's not so simple, but at the same time, as I said before, we have an issue with smuggling in this country, and it's unfortunate what basically we have. And one energy expert lamented the fact that it's the ministers responding, and he made an interesting point, right? Not only did he point out to the fact that the response was slow, although once the Ministry of Energy was involved, he said then the response kind of kicked into its proper gear and got up to speed. He also lamented the response of the TNT Coast Guard. But then he said there's a sense that the politicians try to run everything themselves, and it should not have been the minister to respond. He should have come after the technical team had arrived. And this reminds me of what happened in Paria, where Paria itself did not know how to deal with the crisis. And the first real communication we got, I believe, was from the Minister of Energy. So, of course, that's my opinion, right? But that seems to be how our government is run to some extent, and it shouldn't be so. Public service agencies are supposedly independent, and in some cases, they fight for their independence to the point where it actually might delay government policy, sometimes unnecessarily, sometimes with good reason. But with that said, the Chief Secretary, he has more or less come out and said, hey, whoever owned this barge and owned this oil, you will come out and pay for this mess, because now the cleanup is not just with Tobago beaches, right? And it's also not just with the local fishing industry, because I believe now, given the flow of the spill, we're looking at fishing grounds throughout the southern end of the island, right? Not just to the east, but also to the west. As the spill continues, some of the spill at least unabated, some is caught by Tobago beaches, but some has apparently reached into the waters of Greendot. It hasn't necessarily reached Greendot itself. It'll be at the southern tip of Greendot's waters. However, Greendot could also seek restitution depending on what type of damage is done to their exclusive maritime economic zone, aka their waters, right? And of course, I can't fault the Chief Secretary for not wanting to have to foot the bill both for his own cleanup and potentially anything Grenada might have to say. And then if the spill goes into Venezuelan waters, etc., etc. Venezuela did offer to help, technical help, I believe with regards to the cleanup. I'm not sure how much help they could help us with finding out who the owners are. Like I said, I believe the tugboat is registered in Tanzania. That doesn't necessarily mean that the owner is from Tanzania. Boats can be registered in countries for whatever reason, legal loophole, tax reason, whatever, right? But the Chief Secretary is right for this. But like I said, I think it's going to be an uphill battle depending. Although I don't understand why is it so hard to get this to at least get information. Now, his counterpart, not necessarily his opposition, but his counterpart of the PNM, Ansel Dennis, did say that the Chief Secretary's statements of the cover-up was reckless and pointed to the fact that not too long ago, the Chief Secretary was praising the government response, with the press conference where the Chief Secretary sat next to the Prime Minister, and now he's complaining about cover-up. And I do wonder again if this is just the Chief Secretary's lack of experience showing up. And I think what people need to understand too, it's not just the fact that the TPP doesn't have experience. For better or worse, institutionalized parties, that is to say, parties that are there so long, they're practically national institutions, right? The TPP is new, brand new and minted. To some extent similar to the PDP, and the PDP might collapse in part because it doesn't have the foundation of a party like the PNM. We might lament about all of the things we disagree that the PNM has done throughout the years and how much they may or may not have caused issues with regards to when they were in control for much of the history of our independent nation. But at the end of the day, you cannot deny the foundation. Part of not making communication mistakes or shooting too much off the hip is having both the history of your party to learn from as well as just the institutional knowledge that hopefully your party would have if it is as old as the PNM. Although sometimes with the PNM, I do find that despite its age, it still acts like an immature child. But I can't necessarily disagree with Mr. Dennis because I'm not entirely sure exactly what the Chief Secretary is trying to accomplish when he made these statements. Now, Guyana has also had to, for whatever reason, I believe reporters there was asking the Vice President about Guyana's liability, and he rightfully said, well, no, he doesn't necessarily see how Guyana could be blamed for that, because again, just because it was the destination doesn't mean that the country is liable. If the country owned the oil, that's different. But again, the question was asked, why are you bringing a cargo of oil to an oil producing? Now, maybe of course, logistics meant that, hey, Guyana needed crude oil to refine for gas, or some had a specific need and they needed to import a specific amount of products, right, that their own production was not able to meet in the immediate to short term. It still doesn't necessarily make them liable unless they were the owners. But I guess at the end of the day, it's to find this missing tugboat, and that's not as easy as you think. In the age of satellite imagery and radar, etc., finding one vessel in an ocean that has many other boats, it's a needle in a stack of needles, essentially. CSI might make us think, oh yeah, it's so easy, we just put in the coordinates or lock in the computer image, cross-reference, and it'll scan all the boats and it'll automatically find it. It doesn't quite work that way. Technology isn't what we see in Hollywood just yet. So for that tugboat could easily get lost in the shuffle unless we have some serious investigators trying to find it. I don't know if we have serious investigators in TNT. All right, let's move on to the next story. And two sets of stakeholders, or two parts of the carnival industry are more or less pointing to the fact that this carnival has been a challenging one. The chairman of the NCC, Winston Gypsy Peters, he called carnival a success despite the fact saying that the budget allocation was insufficient and essentially carnival is in the red, right? Mr. Peters is more or less saying that carnival is making a loss, at least the government's side of it, right? And now the question I have to ask is, to some extent, and now we did say that Carnival 2024 brought in $1 billion in revenue, right? But then he says when you look at the balance sheet, there's a lot of writing there. So I'm not too sure. It's seemingly that he's bringing up revenue of the overall carnival, and then point to the fact that the NCC's expenditure has not necessarily been paid off, I guess you could say, has not broken even. And that is somewhat concerning. Now, on one hand, you have to ask yourself, some of the things the NCC spends on might not be commercially viable, might never be commercially viable, and to what extent are we willing to give them up? And to what extent are we willing to pay the price to keep them on? And then the next question that goes alongside that is it that we're doing it wrong and we're not figuring out solutions to make traditional aspects of carnival commercially viable? Because we're not implementing it, well enough, effectively enough, because we're doing it because we've always done it in the same way we've always done it, and we expect people to turn up, and they're not turning up in 2024, and we don't know how to make adjustments to fix it. And maybe there are no adjustments to be made. That's the unfortunate and scary reality or potential reality that we might have to face. At the end of the day, if Carnival evolved, what we have now, even the traditional aspects, is nowhere near what it used to be. And to some extent, do we just have to live with the fact that the evolution might push it to places where we will lose certain things from our past completely, except for maybe the history books, maybe a museum exhibition, maybe very small scale reenactments, etc., etc. And then the FET promoters also, well, they blamed the short season, but I do wonder if it's only with the short season, despite the fact that, I believe the head of the Carnival Association, I don't want to get it wrong here, Tuco, the head of the Trinbago Unified Calypsonian Organization, he said that, the season, generally speaking, was good. Was it good? And now, for Calypso, it seemed to be actually a bit of a resurgence, to be fair. Soca, not so much. There was one letter to the editor basically lamenting the fact, what was the point? They went to the North Stands, which was empty. The grandstand was empty. And for the most part, they just saw, bikinis and beads dancing to the same song over and over and over again, because I think everybody knew well in advance of Carnival Monday and Tuesday what Road March was going to be. Now, the FET promoters are saying it was a short season. I would also argue that a lack of a good music catalog to hype out the crowd, to actually have entertainment to enjoy, it kind of undermines, to be honest, to some extent, the FETs on a whole. Otherwise, you're basically just there to go for a concert of old songs and food and drinks. FETs aren't necessarily, dare I say, FETs are not FETs anymore. They're just concerts. What made them unique, I think, to the carnival season might slowly be dying. But the FET promoters pointed out to the fact that, listen, the season was tough. It was a shortened season. Some FETs did not make it. Of course, there was also the dimension of crime. The head of the, I believe it's the president of the FET Promoters Association, he was talking about this particularly, Jerome Priscilla Rome. And he brought in fact also that there were some people who were looking at the increased police presence as being concerning. It's interesting. The thing that is meant to give you a visible indicator of security. If you have too much of it, it could also be a visual indicator of risk, of danger, of a threat. And he was bringing up that question, you know. I believe, in his opinion, that was very well to be true. And again, we do have to ask, to what extent does the private sector now of Carnival also need to rethink things and not just do things that it did just because it's the way that it was always done? One of the interesting things where both the private and public sector, I think, intersected was the fact that, and okay, Gypsy was saying how, you know, we're in the red. Well, anybody that drove on the avenue leading up to Carnival, particularly, of course, the week before or maybe before that, would have noticed stands were erected in Adamson Square. Except from what I understand, Adamson Square was no longer a judging point. And because of that, bands didn't necessarily come down the avenue like how they did in the past. And from what I understand, both the avenue and Tragrit Road was quite quiet for Carnival Monday and Tuesday. Maybe not for the entire thing, but to the point where road vendors basically were disappointed with regards to the amount of foot traffic, with regards to the amount of sales, and I was told, at least in one case, somebody essentially closed up shop early because it didn't make any sense. Of course, the flip side is, as Carnival bands themselves go into a more all-inclusive territory, perhaps this whole thing needs to be rethought. Why do we have so much booths around the savannah? Do people actually make money in this endeavor? Does it make sense? I don't know, but we're spending money to put these booths up. All right, let's move on quick. This next story is interesting. Of course, Justice Frank C. Prasad, he regularly makes the news for rulings that he makes, and you know, he can be involved in some very important cases that set very important precedents in the country. He is also an outspoken judge who speaks on a religious platform, but mainly, I believe, about ethical observations with regards to society, right? Which I have no issue with. Now, either from his public speaking or from his judgments, threats have been made against his life. And in the past, he has had a police security detail. But now, apparently, the current commissioner has basically told him that, and I want to get it correct. It's reported that the police commissioner sent correspondence to Justice C. Prasad advising that there exist negligible threats against him, and a decision had been taken to revise his security. This, despite the fact that investigations into the threats are still ongoing by the relevant subsections of the TTPS. So, on one hand, I could understand. Just yesterday, I spoke of a quotation in the ruling of Justice C. Prasad's opinion that the crime-fighting systems in the country are not up to scratch, right? And he gave that as part of the justification for his ruling. I'm paraphrasing, right? I can understand why he himself now will want to have security. Now, it could be that the commissioner's assessment of the situation overall might be correct. But to some extent, does she have good reason or evidence to state this? Or is it just because it's been so long and nothing has happened to you, so we're going to lessen the security? Because we don't want to keep paying for it. We don't want to keep putting officers in it. I believe it could be that private security has replaced his protective detail. So it's not as though he is completely unguarded. Although, again, I do wonder if, to some extent, if this decision may make the commissioner look bad. Regardless, though, I do find it interesting here that we have a judge in need of private security. And perhaps, maybe that's the important takeaway from this. That the institutions that are supposed to actually protect us, the citizenry, is also at risk of the 13% detection rate, let's put it that way, for murder. And we've already seen state prosecutors get killed. The question is now, at what point are we going to say, hey, enough is enough? The implications of what's going on are too alarming and we need something more significant of a change. Judge hasn't been killed yet, but the fact that he needs security, and it's been going on since the time of Stephen Williams. And is he the only judge with personal security? So, just to clarify, I believe he's asking for return of police protection. But with that said, sticking with the TTPS, there are nominees for the positions of Deputy Commissioner of Police. They will be debated in the House today. It only needs a simple majority, so they don't necessarily need opposition support. But the opposition pointed out something very important. And I think after what we saw with the commissioner's lack of communication skills, it begs the question. They're coming to debate it, but all they have is the resume of the individual. And, the opposition pointed out, the resume doesn't say everything. A good business does not, especially as you get higher up the levels of hierarchy, you don't just hire somebody based on your resume, right? If you're hiring entry-level people and you're hiring so many that you don't have time to interview them all, that's fine. But when you're looking at part of the executive leadership, it behooves you to get a read on the person, to have a discussion with them, to get a sense of their personality, to get a sense of their character, to get a sense on their communication skills. And parliamentarians do not have an opportunity to interview. That was done by the Service Commission. All they get is the resume, and I guess whatever the assessment is from the Service Commission, except, for better or worse, that's the process that got us the current commissioner. And I don't care what anybody says. You're going to have a hard time to convince me that the current commissioner went through a rigorous process of interviews and assessments, and she came out as, yes, this is a good candidate. She might have come out as the best candidate, but that's possible because the other candidates were even worse. And again, like I opened up the show, the implications of this, I think, we're either ignoring it, we're downplaying it, or we actively are ignorant to it. We avoid having to deal with it. Because potentially, if we just get more of the same, what's the point of even appointing these people? And we're just doubling down on a path that is not necessarily going to help. And then, of course, in May, there are going to have to be questions as who replaces the Commissioner of Police, if she remains. All right, last story. And this is interesting. I just wanted to mention this. There was some traffic yesterday because on Ryson Road, a 40-foot container was leaning, and the drivers essentially were unwilling to continue on at risk of the container basically tipping over because the cargo inside apparently was not necessarily secured properly and tipped over inside the container and shifted the center of gravity. So the driver actually called a colleague to bring a smaller container to come alongside to try to prop up as the cargo was adjusted and repacked in order to rectify the situation. The reason why I bring this up is this caused, again, significant traffic. While there was an attempt to divert it, it caused significant traffic for several hours on Ryson Road, from what I understand. And I just wanted to highlight, again, how easy it is for our transportation infrastructure to be seriously impeded because all we need is an obstacle on one roadway, and it will seriously impact the congestion on basically everything that is going in that direction. So we might think that there are multiple ways, there are multiple roads going east and west of Port of Spain. Ryson Road is one of them. There are other side streets, etc., etc. But I remember a sinkhole just before Cocorite, essentially causing a whole ton of traffic all the way up Woodbrook, all the way to our studios, essentially. And again, what is being done about it? Probably nothing. They say things are being done about it, but nothing worth anything, to be honest. Because traffic is traffic, and we've always had it, and we suffer through it, and we lose a month out of the year because of it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, We'll continue on with the carnival discussions. This is Talking Point on WSN. Sean Michael Small, closing on the week. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Like many others trying to save on Carnival, Gabby thought she should go for 50% off makeup.
What about the other side? Well, Daisy 50% off offer. So you know.
No makeup artist we don't know. What we do know is the savviest savings for Carnival are at KFC. Get a Jab Jab box, 1-piece chicken, 1 regular fries, and a biscuit for only $25.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and I am joined by our arts and culture contributor, among other things. He's a man known, I have to say it like that, because if I actually try to peg down one position in the arts and culture sphere that he has, it might be insulting to the other positions that he holds. Mr. Mark Anthony Peter, good morning.
You do this every time I'm
of
here.
Of course, we're introducing. We have to inform the people. Every now and then we get new viewers, right?
Okay.
You know, or people that might be, you know, not every viewer of every show, you know, religiously is going to monitor every little detail.
Okay.
And also, even when they do, we must remind the people of the credentials. I didn't actually list out the things, right?
Please.
So with that said, of course, Mark and I, we were on Carnival. Mark is somebody that is, you could put it as deeply entrenched into the artistic sphere. One of the things I think coming out of this carnival is with regards to the performing arts aspect of it. And I did say earlier, I felt as though one of the downfalls of this season was some limitations of the art forms, right? Now, maybe some of the traditional areas might have gotten a boost.
Okay.
It seems as though Calypso, this might have been one of the best years for Calypso I've seen in recent times.
Okay.
A soca star winning Calypso Monarch notwithstanding. But even then, I after seeing the performance in full, I could kind of understand that. But still, the lines were a bit blurred this year. Right? And I'm not too sure how I feel about it.
Okay.
Right? And new competitions were added. And hallmark competitions that were at one point in time institutions have still not been reinstituted.
So the lines are always blurred every single year. So with regards to, let's start with Calypso Monarch. So with Calypso Monarch, I watched it. It was great. I love the performances. One thing that I didn't like, and I will say this publicly, I watched it on television. I know people who went to see it live, so I was messaging them. And then when a commercial era had ended, an artist was not wrapping up their performance.
Whoa!
And it happened at least 2 or 3 times.
So an artist was performing during commercial breaks?
Yes. And because the person messaged me and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I'm watching a commercial.
Wow.
So I think we need to do a better job in terms of lining up, you know, television has is one thing for concert, live performances, it's its own world. Television is its own world.
How long were the TV ad breaks? Were they significantly long or not necessarily?
It was a bit, the person was wrapping up their performance.
So they started?
They started during the commercial break.
During the commercial break?
And as soon as we came back to the show, they were saying, thank you, Trinidad and Tobago, have a good night. And I'm like, huh?
Now, I do wonder, because there were similar concerns, I think, with Soca Monarch with regards to time and stage management. And of course, now with high-end competitions, probably every artist wants their own band and they have to set up and blah, blah, blah. And I understand that. But perhaps something should be learned from, say, the Grammys or the Oscars. Well, maybe less so the Oscars, because when they go to break, they don't have scheduled or carded performances. They might have entertainment, or they might just, you know, have the formalities might be put on pause.
There are some nominations that go through that don't make it on the live.
Right, on the live, and you just get mentions of it, right?
Yeah.
But because, yes, it kind of, if you want the product to be as successful as possible, yes, I get it. The live audience is one aspect, and Soca Monarch, the lack of subscription to the live, that's one of the things that was undermining its commercial viability. But the TV viability as well, because you have, in theory, TV ad revenue, although that's one of the things that also came out of Carnival as well, corporate sponsorship. I mean, people with advertising will know that that is an issue, but corporate sponsorship wasn't as strong this year.
Yeah, let me just clarify, it was not during a contestant's performance. It was during a guest. All the contestants had already gone, so you had guest performances like Destra, Ravi B, and people performing after the competition aspect of it had finished.
Well, I think
it was during the guest performance.
I think the criticism is actually in reverse. Those things probably weren't meant to be aired on TV.
Possibly.
And they probably should have, right, because then for the TV broadcast, that could be potentially considered filler unless you're advertising that
but what
for
if
TV.
I'm a Ravi B fan?
Well, I mean, again, were you advertising it for the TV broadcast? You know, it all depends. So it's a fair point because you don't want to bring out star power and have them as filler.
But here's the gag of it all. That one person just wrapped up their performance. We just came back from commercial break, and then right after that they went back to commercials. So it was not timed really well. So like I said, television is its own world. Live concert, live performances is its own world. There needs to be some sort of meeting in the middle, some sort of coordination where stage manager and television production manager need to be in sync on some of these things. Because what if people want to see it? Like, why are you rubbing? Why does Destra get to have the television airtime as opposed to someone else?
And then, of course, if you want the thing to grow, part of it is streaming it, streaming the television broadcast, and the television broadcast looks kind of whatever.
We don't really. I find like the standard of streaming is not where I would prefer it to be. Because sometimes you go on the television station's website. Full disclosure, I am on a television station right now. But sometimes you go to the website and it's taken out, depending on what phone you have, what browser you have, what device you're using, what internet connection you have. Yeah. Sometimes it's not loading. Sometimes you don't have the right plugin to view it. So there needs to be some sort of way where it can be accessible.
Well, I mean, the accessibility is dependent on individual stations. That's unfortunate. But if you have something like Calypso Monarch, that should be handled to be as universal as possible because it's nationally important. Exactly. Now, the actual Calypso Monarch itself, let's get into that. Because I did look at Marshall's whole performance.
Yes. I loved it, by the way.
Yes, I actually found that, ironically, this is a term that not all of my viewers might understand, but I think he actually went off meta, right? And basically his content is not the usual trains of content, and because he was a bit more unique, and then he also added on the fact that, okay, he's doing a degree, right, and you could kind of tell the influence of his education has on his song, so it makes a good story. So when he does the performance, we might not like to admit it, but in competitions like this, judging art is subjective, and when you have a good story behind the art, and sometimes also that adds meaning to the art, right, it then gives you a good impression of the art when it has a good story.
Yeah, his performance was very much a response to all of whatever sorts of criticism, whatever sort of stories people would have told while he was, because he started in Calypso at the young age of 7.
Yeah.
Right. So that's years behind him, right? That he has a good career behind him. So I feel like that was a response to everything that he's been through, a response to everyone's opinions of it, and of him and his career and the decision that he's made to pursue the cultural studies master's degree. And I think, it was a very full circle moment, because then you had the young people, the dancers, dressed in the school uniforms, and that was for me something very, very powerful. And he only switched to soca at the very, very end.
And it wasn't that long.
It wasn't that long.
Because I remember I think it might have been the semi-final or preliminary judges pointing out the fact that he seemed more comfortable in the soca part. Right. But then when you actually hear it, it's so short. It's like, could you assess that he's more comfortable in that part? He seemed very comfortable in the Calypso part.
And then the people who made the cameos. So you had like Terry Lyons, and you had her son come out to play the pan, and then Terry's father, Super Blue, right? So there's that right there. There's that generation of culture, of Calypso, of soca that's happening there.
And he made specific references to the culture, which what gave the lyrics. You know, it wasn't just a fluff piece of, Calypso, soca, Calypso. Yeah. It's like, no. He had some meat on the bones. You know, we're not talking about all kind of corruption and all kind of bacchanal in the parliament. But for what it was, he had substance in his content.
I think there's something to be said about, because there's one could argue there's a formula for Calypso when writing a song. It's either about politics, it's either about crime, it's either about poverty, world issues, or something like that. He made it it was his story.
Yeah.
He made it, not saying...
Well, but it's not limited to his story.
It's not limited to his story. It's his story, but it's also a story that other people can relate to.
Yes.
Right? And so it was very unique among all of the other performers I found. Because you had Karina Shea, who did a fantastic job. I love Karina Shea. Her song was Poverty is No Excuse or something like that,
yes.
right? Which I thought was a really, really good song, right? Then you had Gypsy with his song. So everybody was kind of like, not all in the same vein, but not really outside of the box per se. Like the box is very diverse. But everybody kind of stayed within their own formula, right?
Within the general box.
Within the general box. And he just came and he stood out because it was his personal story.
That's what I meant when I said he went off meta. Because meta is in competitive terms is basically this is the thing that everybody thinks they need to do in order to win.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I'm going left, right? Because we spoke about it in Carnival, where there seem to be generally two types of calypsos: very hard-hitting, political, whatever the issues are, right? And part of the problem with that is people, I think, are tending to assume, oh, well, you just bias against or you bias for.
Right.
And then they have the fluff pieces that are like, you know, let's come together, join hands, kumbaya, some variation of that message, right? Yeah. Which might be too soft, right, for some people. And then Marshall is like, I'm not even going to try to deal with this, you know, dichotomy. I'm just going to go on a full different axis, but still speak about, it's not necessarily like a pressing social issue, but one could argue if Carnival needs to grow, it needs to mature with regards to questions like this. And he's, at the very least, reintroducing the question or the concepts or the topic.
Yeah. I think he was very smart in what he did, and he needs to not needs to, but it was it stood out. It stood out for me. It wasn't much like everyone else. And when you have a full competition, that's why I'm not. It's always a difficult thing judging competitions like this. Anything that has to do with music, especially when there's a test piece, like when everybody's performing the same piece, that's even more difficult. Because
you find so?
I think yes, because then it's you have to think about, because everyone's interpretation is different. So you now have to, as the judge, make your own distinction as to who did it best by serving. That's if originality and creativity is on the rubric. It all depends on the rubric. Right. It all depends on what you're actually judging.
Right.
I think it's a little bit more difficult, personally.
But at least you're judging a common denominator as opposed to everybody's individual songs.
True.
Right?
True.
And like I said, Marshall had a story that made the art more poignant. So it worked, right? So he was smart also with the timing of it.
Yeah. But if you think about it, he's never really responded to the country in that way. He's never really, when people would ask, at least I've never seen when people will ask him about how people, how he would deal with the criticisms or things like that, or people's opinions of his career and his life. He's never responded in this way per se. So it's as I mentioned, timing from 7 years old to his, whatever his age is now.
I mean, he referenced it in the intro.
Exactly. So
he's not too young to soca or too old to soca.
Exactly. Yes. That's one of the criticisms, and he faced that as a child.
Right.
He faced that as a young person.
Well, I mean, he did have too young for soca.
Well,
right?
yes. Right. But it was, he finally said, this is my story. I don't care if you like it or not, but this is what our culture is, this is what calypso is, and this is what it means to me. And then I'll put a piece of soca at the end and we go jam off the stage.
How do you find, because I found it was very interesting, exactly, because yes, it might seem obvious, you know, we reference old calypsonians and we reference the lineage of soca to calypso, but I found it was kind of, what's the word? It was smart how it was written, how it was packaged together, how it was framed.
Yes, and people don't give him...
You know, with the grandfather and the father.
Yes, exactly. People don't give him enough credit of how much of an artist he actually is, right? I know people who are very critical of him, I actually wrote a paper, a short paragraph on it comparing him to Mozart. I'll talk about that at some
other time. Yeah, some other time. We go further than this, right? Wow, Marshall Mozart Montano. That's the next branding. He gave it to you. The Mozart of soca.
Yeah, he was one of the things Marshall was one of the people I compared.
I mean, I actually kind of understand.
Yeah.
Without you explaining, I kind of understand.
The title of the paper was "If Mozart Was a Trini." So I mentioned.
I mean, people
I
might
didn't
not like
just
it.
mention.
Yeah, but people might not like it. But I kind of understand the argument.
I got an A, so I'm fine.
Okay. We're running out of time. I don't know if we have to take a 9 o'clock break. But I wanted to hit the other competition, right? Or competitions.
Right.
But I can't remember who won Chutney Soca Monarch this year.
Ray Ramota.
Right. Okay, so nothing outside of the norm, right?
As far as I remember.
Right. But then there was a new competition, which confused me at first because I'm like, where did this come from? Well, of course, it was the first year of it, right? The intellectual chutney.
The senior intellectual.
Because it was a junior. Yes, right. Yes.
So that's something that came. So it's done by. So let's make some distinctions. Chutney Soca Monarch started in 1994, I believe, or 1995, somewhere around there. And that is and South X is responsible for that.
Right.
Right? Intellectual Chutney Monarch, the governing foundation is the National Chutney Foundation of Trinidad and Tobago. Right? And that bill was passed in 1999, and then Act number 6 was passed in 2000. Right? So 4 years later, when Chutney Soca Monarch started, this thing for this bill for National Chutney Foundation was put through. Right, the president is Dr. Vijay Ramlal Rai. The senior intellectual Chutney Monarch comes out of the school intellectual Chutney Monarch.
Right.
That's where students compete. Right. The word intellectual basically means, and this is a direct quote from the president himself, the lyrical content, a message, and in some cases discussing relevant topics, national or international. So basically saying it's not what the regular chutney soca song might be about. It has to be something that is uplifting, something that references something that's happening within the country, national, or in the world, international or otherwise, right? So it was born out of the school's intellectual Chutney Monarch, right? Which is a collaboration between National Chutney Foundation of Trinidad and Tobago and Ministry of Education, right? And I could not find, I was trying to find what the rules and guidelines were for the senior, but I could only find the one for the school, so I'm going to hope that the rules and guidelines to enter the senior is somewhere along the vein of the same guidelines to enter the school.
Ah, I see.
Right? So no song should be sung in the competition which may cause discrepancy or damage to anyone's religion, race, or gender. Right? The song should maintain the melodic and musical components associated with the art forms of Trinidad and Tobago. The lyrics of the song can be flavored with other languages and should have the original combination of lyrics and melody. Maximum time is 5 minutes is for the school, remember? So all of these things. So I'm thinking it's along the veins of that. It does not specifically say, and then they have the breakdown of musical arrangement, originality of tune and melody, rendition and diction, lyrics, presentation, etc., etc. Right? So those are the guidelines for the school. So I'm hoping that I can still see what that rubric looks like. So then we can.
So we're not entirely sure what.
We're not entirely sure
the
what
intellectual senior intellectual.
Yeah.
Because the winner. Took what I thought was a soca song.
It is a soca song originally.
To what would have been a non-soca competition and won, and I'm not entirely sure. You know, what to make of that. Now, it's not to say that she literally just wholesale took a soca song and slapped it on there and that was that, right?
Yeah.
You know, she did put some effort to make it, somewhat work.
Yeah.
But I still found like, if this was you representing, because this is the first year of the seniors.
This is the inaugural.
So one could argue your first winner sets the tone, at least for a certain amount of time in the future. This is your representation of what this competition is all about.
Right.
And I am confused. Let's just put it that way.
About what?
I am confused as to exactly what is supposed to now make this competition distinct.
The words, the text.
But to some extent, this did not seem to me to be the most lyrical of.
Were the words uplifting to you? Did it talk about any
jam of the air?
Listen, I'm going to say it plainly. What I saw was a soca song was taken and it was arranged for a specific competition.
Right.
Right. Whatever the rules and guidelines, I'm assuming.
And we're not knocking Nyla for doing it.
Not. Of
right?
course not.
She did it.
She won.
She won.
It's not about her.
It's not her fault that she won.
It's not her fault.
It's not her fault that she won.
Right.
But I'm just saying, right? And I'm not even necessarily knocking the judges for picking her as the winner. I'm just saying that I'm confused as to what this competition is supposed to be. Because to some extent, even though, as you said, there's no clear definition of what chutney soca is, but we kind of understand the difference between Soca Monarch and chutney soca.
Yeah.
But now what is the difference with this institution and its goals and competition? Because,
well, I'm assuming with chutney soca Monarch, you can sing about anything. While staying within the rubric, whatever the rubric is. With the intellectual, that's why they put the word intellectually. Intellectual means don't talk about rum, basically. Don't talk about...
I mean, rum literally was the first thing that came to mind.
I know.
Right?
Don't talk about rum. Don't talk about anything along those veins.
So maybe it sounds more constricting than it actually is.
It's a little bit. And they do have two categories. They have the intellectual and then they have the traditional. So the traditional, there is also a winner for the traditional. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the labels that's throwing me.
Yeah.
So congrats to Ms. Blackman. We'll continue the conversation. Of course, we'll also open up the phone line so you could join in about this and other topics. We could talk about Carnival in general if you so wish, but right now we have to break for news on the hour here in WSN. When we return, we open the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Stay tuned.
This is WESN's News on the Hour. Thank you for joining us. Here are the headlines. Works Minister denies claims of hiding information on oil spill in Tobago. Cabinet approves 36 million refurbishment for Gene Pair Complex. 20-year-old killed in Marval. And in regional news, Venezuela is willing to collaborate with TNT in controlling the oil spill. With the details, I'm Keaton Shaw. Transport Minister Rohan Sinanan has emphasized that the government is transparent regarding the oil spill in Tobago. In a statement released on Thursday, Sinanan refuted claims of information being withheld from the Tobago House of Assembly and Chief Secretary Foley Augustin, asserting the need for a collaborative effort to effectively manage the incident for the benefit of the nation's citizens. He said statements made by Augustin regarding a WhatsApp message he received and subsequent conclusions do not allow for the conducting of an investigation free from bias and innuendo. The Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago has announced plans for major refurbishment of the Gene Pair complex in fiscal 2024. According to a media release issued on Thursday, Sport TT recently obtained cabinet approval to proceed with necessary repairs to update the 46-year-old facility and ensure compliance with safety standards. This decision follows a preliminary assessment report conducted in 2022 to evaluate the facility's condition, which identified various areas requiring refurbishment. However, the report also indicated the absence of visible structural issues at the venue. According to the release, the project is expected to cost an estimated $36,105,966.64. A 20-year-old man named Reese O'Brien was fatally shot on Thursday afternoon on Hilltop Drive in Marval. O'Brien sustained gunshot wounds to his neck, chest and arm and tragically passed away during medical treatment. The incident took place around 3:30 p.m. at Hilltop Drive, Saddle Road, with unverified reports suggesting that O'Brien was shot by an individual known to him. In regional news, on Wednesday, Foreign Affairs Minister Ivan Gil announced that Venezuela is willing to collaborate with Trinidad and Tobago in controlling the serious oil spill that has affected the coast of the island nation and involves at least 2 vessels. According to Telsia, the Venezuelan government said that they are in the disposal of government of Trinidad and Tobago to cooperate in whatever is required, adding that Venezuelan technicians have held meetings with Trinidadian officials to assess environmental impacts and mitigation measures. Following the instructions of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Venezuelan officials are monitoring the oil spill, which began a week ago but was not disclosed until Sunday. And that's news to the hour here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you for watching. We'll have more for you at the top of the hour.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, it's been a short week because it was Carnival that just happened. But this is the last chance to get your word in with regards to speaking about any topic that has happened so far throughout the week. There were some things happening. The world did not come to us a complete standstill while we enjoyed Carnival. And of course, there were some things that happened from last week or even ongoing stories from before, which continue unabated. And of course, we have callers coming in hot from Pitty Valley office. Caller, good morning. Caller, you're on here.
Good morning, Sean, and the guest there, if he's still there.
Good morning.
I want to talk about the carnival. Sean, I don't know if you does actually take part in the carnival and go out. It had concern about crime might be detrimental to the carnival this year. I want to tell you that didn't exist. The hotels, the tourist arrival here in Trinidad was up to 100%. All hotel rooms was booked. It's the most that a tourist I've ever seen in a long while. If you had a doghouse in your yard, you could have get rent out. The Fiesta in South, the Calypso Fiesta in South, was full. The panorama was one of the greatest panorama I've seen in the last 10 or 15 years. The high standard of the pan was good. The semis was full. It was over full because people who had tickets could not go in. The pan was full. The Calypso Monarchy in the last 10 or 5 years was one of the greatest I've ever seen. The competition of 11 who take part was at top level. I wasn't singing for Marshall, was against Marshall, but I had was to admit on the night I think he won. But Corinne Ashley, if she had get first, I would not have no complaint either. back to FETs, I heard you say something about some promoter, the FET thing said some FETs was empty.
Well, it was a struggle because of the schedule.
I didn't know what FET, I didn't see that. The FET I went, or my child went, and even the high-end FETs, like St. Mary's was 1,500, was sold out. Boat ride was full, Cooler FET was full, so I think the carnival was a success. That's my contribution this morning.
Thank you, caller.
Funny that he mentioned the CIC, because I know a lot of St. Mary's people couldn't even get into their own FET.
I mean, part of it is because I know with regards to carnival bands, some of them said, well, we based our production on how many people were subscribing to buy carnival packages, right? So they might have sold out, but it didn't necessarily, it wasn't small numbers, but it wasn't as much as it was in years previous. Now, with regards to the FETs, I think one could argue CIC has expanded because they have gone from the school to the grounds. Kudos to them for that. QRC, Fatima, I think they just use their whole internal space now, right? I get that. I think, caller, I'll respond, but we didn't necessarily say that Carnival was bad. We did say this Calypso Monarch was, one of the best ever, and I don't think it had anything to do with the lack of Soca Monarch, with people just shifted to Calypso Monarch. It was because of the quality. We have Diego Martin on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here?
Good morning to you, Mr. Sean, and to your guests.
Good morning.
A quick observation. Tuco, president, he made a statement, and it's a profound statement about attendance in the tents. And you know what he said? He saw East Indian coming back. What that tells us. And the other thing is that I find was very interesting, what Kokoro had to basically shoulder the responsibility of singing things that cause half of the population not to go to tents, those sort of things. But the critical thing I want to talk about and change it a little bit, I want to find out if our country is moving to a state of anarchy. And I'm reading on the newspaper this morning, I'm not going to call it out the front page, where a judge said they have removed a security detail because he has threatened. And he says based on the commissioner's response to him. And I find that strange, and I find that laughable. First of all, you know where I stand with the competency of the Commissioner of Police and how that, the decision she made, how it is in sync with the intelligence and the detection rate of the police service, which is 8%. So when you mass those two things, her decision tells me something is wrong. I'm linking that to an article in the Newsday on January the 8th, where judges were disgruntled of not being invited to Pandey's funeral. And I want to quote what some of the judges had to say. Of concern to the judges is the evidence plan to destroy the status of our office. That is what they're saying. And one of the judges basically went on to say, perhaps soon they will issue policy and directives on how matters should be determined. So what that tells us, the judges are crying out to the country to say, look where the leadership of this country is going. They're removing our details now. Is that to determine the policy they want us to do, how to determine? Because if you scare me in making a judgment, and my life is at risk, for me to survive, I have to basically eat the corn you throw in. We don't want to go down that road. And today there is a debate in Parliament on the Deputy Commissioner. I want everything to be fleshed out there. I don't want 1, 2, 3 earlers to come to the rank because the political direct want to control what comes out of the police service. I go and have a nice day. I am very, very annoyed what I'm seeing.
Thank you, caller. I mean, the thing is, I want to caution people, right, with regards to that. I'm not saying that, Ayla is wrong for doing what she did. But what I am saying is in the context of her track record, it's kind of hard to, give her the benefit of the doubt with this decision. It looks bad just because she looks bad, right? And it might not be fair. It might not be fair. And ironically, I myself, despite all of my criticism for her, I am not entirely comfortable of just condemning this decision. But I have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, it looks off. And it's easy to interpret in a bad way. Now, apparently he has private security in his detail, right? The newspaper said it understands that he has private security. My only thing to this, really and truly, how much are we willing to depend on private security to deal with life-threatening situations, with conflicts or confrontations that could lead to violence, that could lead to death? They're going to put their lives on the line for, you know, are they being paid well enough? I don't know. I don't know. And this is where the judge might want his police detail reinstated. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning. Morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Mr. Peter.
Good morning.
You know, I wasn't going to address it, but the fact is I'm going to do it now. Apart from my other contribution. You know, that caller you have from Diego Martin seems to have an agenda. And let me say this. I want people to look at all Kroko's calypsos and tell me what he has sang that was inaccurate about his content. Inaccurate. Right? And let me leave that there. Let me say this, Sean. I listened to Mr. Peters, the DNC chairman, talk about the generation of the funds that over $1 billion Carnival generates. And he's asking for more money. And I would like, no one has sat down, and I am hoping that some one of those institutions at the Lockjack, University of the West Indies, do a study on Carnival, the economics of and in Carnival, and see where the money is generated and how the money is generated and who benefits from this generation of funds. No one has done that so far in Trinidad and Tobago. That would be an interesting study for us to see where the money comes in and who gets the money. And I'm saying that in the fact that Gypsy is asking for more money, and because the Carnival generates, his estimates, it generates a 1-point-something billion. The other thing is the Tobago issue with the oil spill. What has bothered me about this oil spill, Sean? Your family businesses down that road there. When you go around that road and you go around the corner, there is the NP facility, right? The National Petroleum Marketing Company facility.
Yep.
At that facility, how does Tobago receive its petroleum products? Its gasoline and its diesel. It comes via boat. There's a boat that comes up there, and there's a single point mooring because there's no jetty at the back there. The boat comes up and it connects to a hose and it's pumped ashore. And I was amazed that I did not hear when that spill took place initially that NP was not drawn on to use their capabilities to contain the spill. So it begs the question: does NP have any sort of oil spill response in Tobago? That is very worrying because this boat comes to Tobago every 2 weeks or so. And the third thing is the issue of the oil spill going into the Caribbean Sea and Greendot's worrying, having to invoke their people. You know, at the CARICOM level, we have countries from Tobago straight up the road to Antigua that have that have beaches and rely on tourism. And at the CARICOM level, we don't have a CARICOM oil spill response plan. It is so ridiculous that this little thing in Tobago has opened up or shown us where we are lacking in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago with our oil spill response. I am very dissatisfied with that oil spill response in Tobago for a country of Trinidad and Tobago that has had an oil industry for over 100 years. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. I mean, can't fault you for that. And the question about what resources does MP have? Not just if they have a plan, but do they have resources? Or was it that TEMA was basically, that was the plan? And if that's the case, I fine.
This may be a naive question, but is it possible that no one thought that this might ever happen?
Potentially. No, I think to some extent there is a general plan, but part of the problem is because it's not a regular occurrence, specific challenges, we're not going to have institutional knowledge to deal with specific challenges. And then on top of that, this type of oil spill, because the boat it's not like it was a boat that was tracked and it's going, the boat that the caller was referencing, that's a usual occurrence. They know the route, they know the conditions, they know what to expect. It's not easy to control and to respond to. This situation with the barge, where they didn't even know that the barge probably had however amount of fuel available, there's a lot of unknowns. So I understand that. I didn't necessarily expect the response to be perfect, but I think, like the caller, the timing of it, because we have a Coast Guard that, and this thing just comes into our waters and we have no clue what it is and where it's going and why it's going, and but somehow we're supposed to secure our borders from smugglers.
Interesting.
We have a caller from Samoa. Good morning, caller. Caller, you on here?
Yes, morning to you all.
Morning.
Good morning.
A gentleman called a while ago about the state guard or the judge or some other thing. Right? Why the judge don't call that general meeting to help the country with the crime? The plan is from since 2015 to let go all the gunmen. It's simple. We know it has a gang in the judiciary. What the hell, everybody quarreling about the commissioner, the prime minister. The prime minister holding back up. If he only open his mouth and tell the population the truth about the opposition with a plan, this country gone, I warning all you. The prime minister have information that he cannot explore on us here, the poor people. He know why. You know why? The PNM know the culture of the state plan. He know the strength of two sets of breed here. The indigenous people and the Africans. They were the first to join blood here. Right? I mean, some of them not seeing the brighter light why these AR-15s coming in here and the purpose. But we on the northern range know the purpose. Right? So they had to watch what they're saying and who they're complaining about. Right? Let the judiciary do their proper job and assist the police with this criminal and gun business. Because the opposition plan is from 2015 is to bring this government down by any means necessary. Good morning to Trinidad. Good morning to the two settlers, the Africans and the East Indians. Goodbye.
Thank you, caller.
I would like to respond to the, before you respond to that caller, the previous caller who asked, who says that people coming out that University of the West Indies should do some more research in terms of the economics. I would like to say that the research is being done both out of the University of the West Indies as well as the University of the Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Trinidadians and Tobagonians who study abroad, who come out of Howard University and things like that. I think the problem is it may not be presented to the public in a way that they can digest, because it's a lot goes into a thesis and dissertation.
But is there enough statistical data to get a thorough analysis? That was one of my concerns. It's not.
Well, we have to see what we have. But I know for sure, because we have coming out of programs like UTT has the PhD and the Masters in Cultural Studies, and then you have the university having the postgraduate diploma and I think the Masters in Cultural and Enterprise Management. So all of those projects and all of those theses and dissertations,
one of the things with universities is the process of your education. You write papers which contribute to academia. Exactly. So it's not just professors doing research, it's also students doing research, and hopefully as these programs further mature, the information will add up, I guess you could say, at some point.
At some point.
And build up to a more comprehensive view.
Correct, yes.
But we're not there yet.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Is it that we now started?
Not now starting. I think, if you talk in comparison to other universities that have been doing research for
with other topics.
With other topics for like hundreds of years, yes, we're pretty young. But I know the research is being done. I think the problem is probably accessibility, because as you would have known, in terms of doing your research on your own as well, getting research is a little bit difficult because now we have all of these websites that I like to call them thesis publishers, where you're very limited into what you can access unless you're a member of the website or a member of this stuff, and you have to pay citizens.
Right. But I'm also thinking about actual dollars and cents, accounting information,
I'm sure.
business information, and then I've got who doesn't want to reveal the information and so on, right?
That's the problem.
I'll go back to that $1 billion comment later, because again, I think Gypsy was literally talking about two things at the same time, and it was incorrect of him to do so because comparing them is incorrect. But we have a caller from, I believe it's Santa Cruz. Good morning, caller, you on here?
Good morning, good morning, good
morning.
Good morning.
Gentlemen. Okay, first, there is so much to talk about, but I'll try to be brief, try my best. Regarding the oil spill in Tobago, I looked at it as a matter of, as joy happens, so does pain and sadness, living in the same house. But we know that Trinidad and Tobago is managed from a reactive position rather than a proactive position. And I'm so happy that you started talking about, because that was my question. What is the purpose of UE and UTT? Because for me, for example, we live in the Caribbean. Therefore, part of your scientific studies should be, how do we create paint that would withstand rain and sand and all of that? How do we create wood or wood products that would withstand termites and, the things that affect us here in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean? So the fact that we've had an oil industry for as long as we have and have not had the forethought to think of what happens if a boat capsizes in the water. What do we do? Is there anything that we can use from within the environment that could soak up the oil that's coming around? As Mr. Augustine said, thank God for the sargasso weed that was able to absorb some of the oil that spilled there in Tobago. So this, it's sad that this had to happen, but I am hoping that eventually we would be able to foresee some things, think ahead, so that if you have this product, there's a possibility that the bad thing will happen. If the bad thing happens, what do we do to prevent mass destruction? Right? So that's my one take on the good and the bad living in the same place and not being prepared to deal with the bad, because it could show up.
Thank you, caller.
Right?
Yes.
Can I say something about Carnival?
Quick.
Yes.
Okay, Carnival. Carnival Village is a wonderful, wonderful idea. Why does Carnival Village close before Carnival is over? Good question. Because that's why the people are there, to sell. The majority of people will be coming through, Monday and Tuesday, and the village is closed, so vendors have nothing to sell. Tickets for the North Stand and the Grandstand. For the first time in my life, I had tickets for North Stand to go to Panorama Semis. Couldn't get into Panorama Semis because I couldn't get into the North Stand because it was oversold, ram-cram. Nobody could get in. Okay, how about you have an empty grandstand? How about making an announcement that all ticket holders standing outside of the North Stand that are unable to get in, please come over to the grandstand, show your ticket, and get in. That's just one way of dealing with it, apart from what you all did to allow overcrowding in the grandstand. Secondly, it was a great idea having no bottles in carnival areas. I did see with my own two eyes a large band going by and a reveler from within the band and a security officer a bottle to put in the garbage outside. Why couldn't the security officer say to him, give it back to the truck so that they can keep it there? Why did the truck give it to? Anyway, that's what I saw. And as far as the people, the traffic, the same way no bottles allowed in areas where there are carnival festivities, any vehicles operating in areas during carnival festivities should drive at a slow pace. You wouldn't want to see how they were driving on Aripita Avenue on Tuesday night. People walking in the street and cars speeding down the street because it was after 7 and there were apparently no more bands. I'll rest there.
Thank you,
Paul. It was lovely. It was interesting. It was different, thank God. The only thing that I heard of, didn't witness, was on Queen Street between Frederick and Charlotte that there was a robbery of 3 people, but didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Other than that, the police, thank you for your presence. Organization, I can't start here, but thank you, and God bless us all. God bless Trinidad and Tobago. Love you guys. And I miss Miss Petey Valley's voice. Bye.
Bye, Cola. Thank you. All right, quick, I was going to say, with regards to this oil spill, though, this was outside of what probably is reasonably predicted, to be fair. But, and then now one has to ask, you know, did we underestimate our responsibility and the resources we put to it? And this goes back to the fact that this government's main driving philosophy is cutting costs. And I'll just leave it there, right? So where are we going to find money for all of these extra things when we don't even have enough money for the fire service and people's houses burning down? Right? So again, the implications, right, about the lack of resources for this, think about, ask the question, right? Paria happens. Do we have the correct resources to deal with that tragedy? And so on and so on and so on. We are a maritime nation at the end of the day by default. You know, we can't avoid the sea. Like I said, Mr. Peters said $1 billion generated, and then Carnival, well, he's in the red, right? But I think the red is talking about government expenditure, NCC expenditure, and I think the $1 billion is the industry as a whole, right?
He said it in the same sentence.
I think it was, or either he said it in the same sentence, or it was grouped together by reports.
I see.
And because I don't think the NCC made $1 billion in revenue and still, right, was in the red. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did make $1 billion in revenue, right? And I'm wrong, and then the industry made even more money. But at the end of the day, that's what I suspect.
Can we see those financials?
That's part of it, right? That's part of it for the study. You need to have those, but you also need private information, but you need to have public information. And with regards to, and I'll just say this, with regards to racial content, I think at the end of the day, people need to understand that at some point it is subjective. It's subjective, so the perception of what is acceptable or not will vary, whether we like to admit it or not. Right? It will vary. And it will vary not just with regards to the content, but also with the context. So how you want to judge Crocro's Calypso offerings and statements that he made or not, I don't think it's necessarily clear-cut. I appreciate that you disagreed with the caller. And to be fair, those are legitimate questions to be asked or concerns to be raised with regards to, you know, how someone else frames things like that. But would you say, to close the show, would you say we're still too sensitive for these discussions?
Depends on where you are and what you've experienced.
But that basically is partially a yes.
Depends partially. Depends on where you are and what you experience. Depends,
Although, if moist Indians are going back to Calypso tense, perhaps, you know, there's some healing going on, and we're happy to see that, folks. Mr. Peters, thank you for joining me once again.
Mr. Who?
Mr. Anthony Peter.
Mr. Peter. You said Mr. Peters just.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Peter. Mr. Peter. My bad. My bad. You gotta be clear.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for Mr. Anthony Peter, Mr. Mark Anthony Peter. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our callers for their contribution as well. Some interesting points raised, and again, I think some of them are ongoing issues that we have not addressed as a society, and hopefully we will address them. The question is when. Today is a good day, as my coach always says. We can make it if we try. Despite all of the pessimism, that went on in this show. I still believe in TNT.
Of course.
I'll mark this as well. Folks, we will see you next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
WESN.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug.
You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.